year is 1888. A relentless sun beats down on the rugged terrain of Mallorca, its heat shimmering off the ancient stones of Valdemosa. The air, thick with the scent of pine and olive trees, usually carried the distant murmur of village life. But today, an unsettling silence hung heavy. Inspector Mateo Vargas, a man whose sharp eyes had seen the best and worst of humanity in Madrid, found himself miles from the familiar bustle, dispatched to this remote corner of the Balearic Islands. His assignment, vague and disquieting, had only deepened his unease. A report of an unusual occurrence at the secluded Santa Clara Abbey. Mateo's carriage rumbled along the dusty track, the rhythmic clatter of hooves the only sound breaking the oppressive quiet. He peered out the window, his gaze sweeping over the sun-drenched landscape, a stark contrast to the shadowed dread in his gut. Valdemosa, a picturesque village nestled amidst the mountains, now felt like a stage set for a silent, unsettling play. He'd heard whispers on his journey, rumors of a strange affliction, of women struck dumb, their minds adrift. Such tales, often exaggerated by rural folk, usually held a grain of truth. But 51 women. It defied explanation. As the abbey's ancient walls loomed into view, Mateo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the fading afternoon heat. The building, grand and imposing, seemed to exhale an aura of forgotten prayers and unspoken secrets. Smoke curled lazily from a single chimney, a stark reminder that life, however altered, persisted within. But what kind of life? He dismounted, his boots crunching on the gravel path. The heavy wooden door of the abbey stood ajar, as if inviting, yet simultaneously warning him. He pushed it open slowly, the creak echoing in the cavernous entrance hall. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light piercing the stained glass windows, illuminating an eerie tableau. 51 women. They stood there, perfectly still, like statues carved from flesh and bone. Their eyes, though open, seemed to see nothing. Their faces, pale and unlined by expression, betrayed no emotion, no thought, no recognition. They were dressed in simple, unadorned robes, their hands clasped loosely in front of them, or hanging limply at their sides. A few had fallen, slumped against the cold stone walls, or collapsed in heaps on the floor, yet even in their fallen state, they remained utterly motionless, devoid of any natural human response. Mateo moved cautiously through the silent assembly, his heart hammering against his ribs. He called out, his voice a strained whisper. "Hello? Is anyone here?" No response. Not a flicker of an eyelid, not a twitch of a finger. It was as if time had stopped for them, trapping them in an eternal present. He reached out hesitantly to touch the arm of a young woman standing near a pillar. Her skin was cool, almost clammy, and her body, though seemingly rigid, had a strange, unsettling pliancy to it. It was like touching a wax figure, yet her chest, he noted, rose and fell with the faint rhythm of breath. They were alive, but not living. A sudden sharp cough broke the oppressive silence. Mateo spun around, hand instinctively going to the pistol at his hip. From the shadowed depths of a corridor emerged a figure. An elderly woman, her face deeply lined, her eyes holding a weary resignation. She wore the simple habit of an abbey servant, her apron stained and her hair disheveled. "You must be the inspector," she said, her voice raspy yet surprisingly steady. "I am Catalina, the last one left." Mateo studied her, a million questions swirling in his mind. "Catalina, what is happening here? What happened to these women?" Catalina's gaze swept over the motionless figures, a profound sadness clouding her eyes. "It began 3 days ago. One by one, they simply stopped. Like their souls left their bodies, but their bodies remained." She paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "And they have no memory of anything before this affliction. None." The revelation sent a fresh wave of dread through Mateo. No memory? This wasn't merely a physical ailment. It was something far more sinister, a theft of identity, a complete erasure of their pasts. He looked at the unmoving women, then back at Catalina, a desperate need for answers burning in his eyes. We need to understand this, Catalina, from the very beginning. Tell me everything. Catalina sighed, a heavy, world-weary sound. It started with a new arrival, Inspector. A young woman just a few weeks ago. She brought something with her, something that stirred things up. Then, one by one, the others began to change. Mateo felt a jolt of alarm, a new arrival. This wasn't just a random tragedy. There was a catalyst, a hidden cause. The mystery was deepening, and the silence of the Abbey seemed to press down on him, amplifying his unease. He had a feeling this would be the most perplexing case of his career. If you enjoyed the start of this mystery, please consider subscribing to the channel for more captivating tales. Remember, this is a fictional story. Mateo led Catalina to a small, untouched parlor, its furniture covered in white sheets, as if waiting for a return that would never come. He insisted she sit and offered her water, which she drank with trembling hands. The old servant, though clearly exhausted, possessed a sharp mind and an unwavering will to convey the horror she had witnessed. "Tell me about this new arrival, Catalina," Mateo urged, his voice soft but firm. "Her name, where she came from, everything you know." Catalina wrung her hands. "Her name was Sister Isabella. She arrived about a month ago, a transfer from a convent in Seville. She was different. Not like the others. Quiet, yes, but with a gaze that seemed to pierce right through you. She carried a small, leather-bound journal with her everywhere, kept it clutched to her chest, almost religiously. Did anyone else see this journal? Did she speak of its contents?" Mateo pressed, his mind already forming a connection. "No, Inspector. She was very protective of it. And she spoke very little, only when absolutely necessary. But her presence, it changed the atmosphere in the Abbey. Before her, it was peaceful, if a bit monotonous. After her, a strange tension settled. The sisters became agitated, restless." Catalina paused, her eyes widening slightly as if reliving the first signs of the escalating horror. They started having vivid dreams, nightmares, some of them. They would wake up screaming or in cold sweats. Then during the day they'd seem distracted, distant. They'd stare off into space, sometimes for long minutes. It was subtle at first, easily dismissed as fatigue from restless nights. "And Sister Isabella, did she also exhibit these symptoms?" Mateo asked, leaning forward. "No," Catalina said, shaking her head emphatically. "That's what was so strange. She seemed unaffected, or rather, she seemed to be watching them, observing. She would sit in the chapel during their periods of silence, her eyes fixed on them, almost as if she was studying a collection of specimens." Mateo frowned. This sounded less like an illness and more like something else, an experiment, a deliberate act. The thought was chilling. "Did you ever hear her speak to the other sisters about their dreams?" "Only once," Catalina recalled, her brow furrowing in concentration. "I overheard her in the garden with Sister Anna. Sister Anna was weeping, speaking of a recurring dream where she was trapped in a dark room, unable to move or speak. Sister Isabella just listened, then said, 'The darkness is not what you fear, Anna. It is the silence that follows.' It made no sense to me then, but now." Her voice trailed off, a shudder running through her frail body. "And when did this stopping begin?" Mateo prompted gently. 3 days ago, just after Vespers. Sister Lucia was the first. She was tending the rose garden, humming a hymn, and then she just stopped. Mid-hum, her hands froze around a pruning shear. Her eyes were open but empty. We tried to rouse her, but it was no use. She wouldn't respond, wouldn't move, wouldn't even blink unless we forced her eyelids open. Then, within hours, another and another. It spread like a contagion, but a silent one. No fever, no cough, no outward sign of illness. Just stillness. Catalina's voice was filled with a raw, desperate fear that transcended her weary demeanor. The abbess, Mother Superior Elena, tried everything. She prayed, she called for a doctor from the village, but he could do nothing. He said it was beyond his understanding, a malady of the spirit perhaps. He fled, Inspector. He couldn't bear to look at them. Mateo felt a surge of professional frustration. A doctor fleeing the scene? It spoke volumes about the unsettling nature of the affliction. And Mother Superior Elena, where is she now? Catalina's eyes welled up with tears. She is among them, Inspector. She was the last to succumb. She stood in the chapel praying over the others, begging God for deliverance. And then, in the middle of a Hail Mary, her voice simply died. Her hands froze in prayer. She joined the others, a living monument to their collective despair. The image of the Mother Superior succumbing to the same fate as her flock sent a cold shiver down Mateo's spine. This was no ordinary plague. This was something that attacked the very core of a person's being, their will, their consciousness. He looked back at the motionless figures in the hall, their silent forms now imbued with a terrifying new dimension. Sister Isabella, he realized, was the key. He had to find her, and that journal. Catalina, Mateo said, his voice firm, we need to search the abbey, every room. Did Sister Isabella have a specific cell? Yes, Inspector. Catalina nodded, pointing towards a narrow corridor. The one at the end of the east wing. But be careful. There are things in this abbey now that feel wrong. Her warning hung in the air, a chilling prelude to the discoveries awaiting him. The east wing of the abbey was even colder and darker than the main hall, despite the late afternoon sun streaming through the high, arched windows. The air was heavy with the scent of old stone and disuse. Each step Mateo took echoed loudly, amplifying the oppressive silence. Catalina, though clearly terrified, accompanied him, her lamp casting flickering shadows that danced like restless spirits. Sister Isabella's cell was small and Spartan, typical of a monastic dwelling. A narrow cot, a simple wooden desk, and a crucifix on the wall were its only furnishings. But it was the desk that immediately drew Mateo's attention. It was meticulously neat, almost unnervingly so. On it lay a single leather-bound journal, exactly as Catalina had described. Mateo approached it cautiously, his gloved hand reaching for the worn cover. As he picked it up, he felt a strange tremor, a sense of profound weight beyond its physical mass. The leather was smooth and cool, the pages within promising answers, or perhaps only more questions. He opened it, his eyes scanning the elegant script. It was written in a formal, almost academic hand, and the language was Latin. "Can you read Latin, Catalina?" Mateo asked, a flicker of hope in his voice. Catalina shook her head. "No, Inspector. Only the Mother Superior and some of the more educated sisters knew Latin well. I only understand a few common prayers." Mateo sighed, a knot of frustration tightening in his stomach. He knew enough Latin to decipher basic phrases, but a complex journal would require an expert. Still, he began to flip through the pages, searching for anything that might offer an immediate clue. What he found were not prayers or religious meditations, but detailed observations. The entries meticulously documented the daily routines of the sisters, but with an unsettling scientific detachment. Dates, times, and then, alongside each name, strange notations. Pupil dilation, moderate, gaze duration, prolonged, respiratory rate, shallow, periods of agitation, increasing. It was as if Sister Isabella was conducting a clinical study on the Abbey's inhabitants. One entry, dated a week prior, caught Mateo's eye. It was written in a slightly different, more agitated hand. Subject 37, Sister Anna, reports recurring dream of confinement. Claims sound of bells is distorted, wrong. Subject 12, Sister Sophia, claims to see shadows that are not there in periphery. All subjects exhibiting heightened sensory perception, particularly auditory. Auditory perception, Mateo murmured, his mind racing. The dreams, the distorted sounds. He flipped further, past more of these chilling observations, until he reached a section filled with detailed anatomical sketches of the human brain, labeled with precise Latin terms. It wasn't the work of a nun. It was the work of a scholar, a physician, or perhaps something darker. Beneath the sketches, he found what appeared to be a formula, a complex series of chemical compounds written in precise chemical notation. It was completely out of place, an anachronism within the sacred confines of the abbey. Extractum flos nocturna, he read, deciphering the Latin for night flower extract, followed by other botanical names he didn't recognize. The formula was intricate, suggesting a sophisticated knowledge of pharmacology. His eyes then landed on a loose folded piece of parchment tucked between the pages. It was a crude map of the abbey grounds, with several locations circled. One, marked with a prominent X, was labeled Fontana Segreta, the secret fountain. Another, closer to the abbey walls, simply read Crypta. Mateo's gaze sharpened. A secret fountain and a crypt. He remembered Catalina's earlier mention of something Sister Isabella had brought with her. Could it be related to this? He thought of the village doctor's dismissive comment about a malady of the spirit. What if it wasn't spiritual at all, but rather a physical agent? A poison? A hallucinogen? The scientific notations and sketches in the journal pointed strongly in that direction. Catalina, Mateo said, his voice low. Do you know of a secret fountain on the abbey grounds, or a crypt that isn't the main one? Catalina looked startled. The secret fountain. It's an old spring, said to have healing properties. It's overgrown, hardly used. As for a crypt, there's only the main burial vault under the chapel. Unless... She hesitated, her eyes wide. There were rumors long ago of a smaller, forgotten crypt dating back to the abbey's founding. A place where the very first abbesses were laid to rest. But no one has found it in generations. A cold premonition settled over Mateo. The formula, the meticulous observations, the sudden onset of symptoms, and now a hidden fountain and a forgotten crypt. Sister Isabella wasn't a victim. She was the architect of this silent horror. The journal was her confession, her research notes. We need to find this secret fountain, Catalina, and this forgotten crypt. Mateo's voice was firm, resolute. He felt a surge of purpose. This wasn't just a mystery. It was a race against time, though he wasn't sure what he was racing against. The women were alive, but were they truly living? And could they ever be brought back from this terrifying stillness? The abbey's silence seemed to mock him, challenging him to unravel its dark secrets. Guided by Catalina's fading memories and the crude map from Isabella's journal, Mateo navigated the overgrown paths behind the abbey. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, but the creeping shadows felt less like twilight and more like a shroud descending upon Valdemosa. The air grew cooler, carrying the damp scent of ancient earth and decaying foliage. They finally stumbled upon the secret fountain, a small, stone-lined spring almost entirely concealed by thick ivy and gnarled fig trees. Its water, usually clear and inviting, had a faint, almost imperceptible film on its surface, and a subtle, sickly, sweet odor hung in the air around it. Mateo's stomach churned. This was it. "This is it," he confirmed, his voice grim. He knelt, dipping a gloved finger into the water. It felt slightly viscous, not like pure spring water. He brought his finger close to his nose, sniffing cautiously. The sickly, sweet smell was more pronounced now, almost cloying. He remembered the formula in Isabella's journal: night flower extract and other obscure botanicals. Could these plants, common to the region, be the source of a powerful neurotoxin? "Catalina, do the sisters drink from this fountain regularly?" Mateo asked, a horrifying realization dawning on him. Catalina shook her head slowly. "Not regularly, Inspector. Most of our water comes from the main well, but sometimes, especially when the main well runs low in dry seasons or for special ceremonial purposes, the younger sisters might draw water from here. It's believed to be purer, more blessed." "And when did Sister Isabella arrive?" Mateo pressed. "About a month ago, as I said. She seemed fascinated by this fountain, spent hours here sometimes. I thought she was praying." Catalina's voice was laced with a dawning horror, connecting the dots as Mateo spoke. Mateo's mind raced. Isabella had arrived a month ago. The agitation and strange dreams began shortly after. And then, the stillness. The time frame aligned perfectly. She hadn't poisoned the main well directly. That would have been too obvious, too quick. Instead, she had subtly contaminated this secret fountain, perhaps gradually increasing the concentration or introducing a substance that had a delayed, cumulative effect. This explained why it wasn't all the sisters at once, but a slow, terrifying progression. "She wasn't praying, Catalina. She was poisoning it," Mateo stated, his voice devoid of emotion, the sheer premeditation of the act chilling him to the bone. "She used the reputation of this fountain, its supposed purity, against them." He looked around, his eyes searching. Near the fountain, partially hidden by a thick bush, he found a small, discarded glass vial, its bottom crusted with a dark, oily residue. He picked it up carefully, holding it up to the fading light. It smelled faintly of that same sickly sweet aroma. This was the delivery method. "She must have been adding something to the water," Mateo explained, "a substance that slowly attacked their nervous system, their minds. The dreams, the agitation, the sensory changes, these were the early symptoms, and then the ultimate paralysis, the loss of memory, leaving them in this suspended state." The thought was monstrous. Isabella had systematically, coldly, and deliberately incapacitated 51 women, stealing their minds, their very identities. But why? What was her motive? The journal, with its scientific observations and anatomical sketches, suggested a twisted form of research. But to what end? "We must get this vial to a chemist in Palma," Mateo declared, carefully wrapping it in a handkerchief. "They might be able to identify the substance. It's our best chance to find an antidote, if one exists." He looked at the murky water of the fountain, then back at the abbey, a dark silhouette against the twilight sky. The motionless women inside, their silent forms standing as a testament to Isabella's chilling machinations. He felt a profound sense of urgency. The crypt. What secrets did it hold that were so important to Isabella? "Now, the crypt, Catalina," Mateo urged, his gaze fixed on the abbey. "Where might this forgotten crypt be?" Catalina, pale and trembling, pointed towards a section of the abbey wall near the old cemetery, where a cluster of ancient, half-buried tombstones lay. "There's an old, crumbling archway there, Inspector. It's said to lead to a forgotten passage. Perhaps it's connected." The air grew colder as they approached the cemetery, a place already steeped in death and memory. The idea of a forgotten crypt, untouched for centuries, added another layer to the chilling mystery. Isabella's actions were precise, deliberate, and deeply unsettling. The darkness of the night was now fully upon them, and the abbey, Once a sanctuary, felt like a tomb, its secrets whispering on the wind. Thank you for watching. If you're captivated by the unfolding mystery, be sure to subscribe to our channel for the thrilling conclusion. Remember, this is a fictional story. The old cemetery, neglected and overgrown, was a labyrinth of crumbling headstones and wild, thorny bushes. The air here was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, a stark contrast to the fragrant pines of the surrounding mountains. Mateo and Catalina moved slowly, their shadows long and distorted in the beam of Catalina's lamp. The full moon had risen, casting an eerie silver glow over the silent graves, making the ancient abbey loom even more menacingly in the background. Catalina's memory, spurred by the urgency of their quest, finally led them to a section of the cemetery wall that seemed more ancient and dilapidated than the rest. Hidden behind a thick curtain of ivy, they found it, a small, almost imperceptible archway, half buried in the earth. The stones around it were moss-covered and cracked, suggesting it had been untouched for centuries. It was exactly as Isabella's crude map had indicated. Mateo pulled away the thick vines, revealing a narrow, darkened opening. A gust of cold, stale air, heavy with the smell of dust and something vaguely metallic, wafted out. This was no ordinary crypt. This was a place forgotten by time, a sealed chamber waiting to yield its secrets. He pulled out his own lantern, its light cutting through the oppressive darkness. "Stay close, Catalina," Mateo instructed, his voice low. He knew the risks of entering such a place, but the answers they sought were undeniably here. The passage sloped downwards, the rough-hewn steps slick with dampness. The silence inside was absolute, broken only by their own measured breathing and the soft scuff of their boots. The walls were rough stone, some sections revealing ancient faded carvings, symbols Mateo couldn't decipher, but which added to the crypt's unsettling aura. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into a small, circular chamber. In the center, illuminated by their lanterns, stood a single, weathered stone sarcophagus. It was unlike any other burial he had seen. Instead of effigies or inscriptions, its surface was covered in a series of intricate, almost obsessive etchings. They resembled patterns, interlocking lines and geometric shapes that seemed to twist and contort the deeper he looked. Mateo approached the sarcophagus cautiously. The metallic smell was stronger here, a faint, almost imperceptible tang that prickled his nostrils. He ran a gloved hand over the etchings, feeling the rough, cold stone. These weren't decorative. They felt like a code, a deliberate design. Beside the sarcophagus, on a small, crumbling stone pedestal, lay another object. A book. Unlike Isabella's personal journal, this one was ancient, its cover made of hardened leather, its pages thick parchment yellowed with age. It was bound with iron clasps, giving it a formidable, almost forbidden appearance. Mateo's heart pounded. This had to be the source, the inspiration for Isabella's twisted experiment. He carefully unlatched the clasps, the rusty metal groaning in protest. As the book opened, a fine cloud of dust rose, carrying with it a faint, bitter scent. The pages were filled with similar intricate patterns to those on the sarcophagus, interspersed with faded, hand-drawn illustrations of plants and strange, almost microscopic organisms. And beneath them, archaic Latin text, far more complex than anything in Isabella's journal. "This is it, Catalina," Mateo whispered, his voice full of a grim certainty. "This is what she was after." He began to skim the ancient text, his rudimentary Latin struggling to keep pace. The language was convoluted, filled with obscure terms and archaic phrasing. But certain words, repeated often, began to stand out. Anima separata, separated soul; voluntas captiva, captured will; stasis mentis, mental stasis. And then, The chilling phrase, Flos nocturna perfectus, the perfect night flower. This wasn't merely a book of old beliefs or forgotten botanical remedies. It was a treatise, a dark manual on how to achieve a state of suspended animation, a profound disconnection between mind and body. It detailed the precise preparation of a potent extract from the night flower, a rare plant, along with other compounds. It spoke of its effects, a gradual cessation of voluntary movement, a profound amnesia, and a persistent, dreamlike state. It was a chilling blueprint for the horror unfolding in the abbey. Mateo looked at the sarcophagus, a sickening realization dawning on him. The person buried within, perhaps one of the abbey's ancient abbesses, was not just interred here. She was the subject, or perhaps even the author of this terrifying knowledge. This crypt wasn't just a burial place, it was a laboratory, a testament to a forbidden, centuries-old pursuit. She wasn't trying to heal them, Mateo stated, his voice hollow. She was perfecting the process. This isn't just poison, Catalina. It's a key to controlling the mind, to holding it captive. The thought was horrifying. Isabella wasn't trying to kill the women, she was trying to trap them, to strip them of their memories, their will, leaving them as empty vessels. But to what end? Power, knowledge, a perverse sense of scientific triumph. The mystery had deepened, revealing an ancient, insidious connection to the very foundations of the abbey. Mateo felt a cold dread settle in his bones. He knew now that his investigation had stumbled upon something far more sinister than a simple crime. Mateo, clutching the ancient tome and Isabella's journal, returned to the main hall with Catalina. The motionless women stood as silent sentinels, their unseeing eyes seeming to follow his every move. The weight of the discoveries in the crypt pressed down on him. This was not a simple act of madness. It was a deliberate, calculated, and historically rooted manipulation. "We need to go to the village, Catalina," Mateo announced, his voice firm. "I need to contact Palma, and I need a scholar to translate this ancient text. Every moment counts." As they prepared to leave, a faint sound, almost imperceptible, reached Mateo's ears. A soft, rhythmic clicking from the shadowed corner of the grand hall. He froze, his hand instinctively going to his pistol. Catalina gasped, her eyes wide with terror. "What was that?" she whispered, clutching Mateo's arm. Mateo, his gaze fixed on the shadowy corner, realized what it was. A rosary. And then a figure slowly emerged from the darkness. Sister Isabella. She was not motionless like the others. Her eyes, though still distant, held a chilling clarity. Her movements were slow, deliberate, almost balletic, as if she were moving through a dream. She looked at Mateo, then at the journal in his hand, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. It was a smile of recognition, of triumph, and of a chilling detachment. "You found it," she said, her voice surprisingly soft, almost melodious yet devoid of warmth. "The knowledge, the true purpose." Mateo stood his ground, his heart hammering. "What have you done to these women, Sister Isabella? And why?" Isabella took a step closer, her gaze drifting over the silent figures of the sisters, a strange pride in her eyes. "I have liberated them. Liberated them from the torment of memory, from the burden of their pasts. They are in a state of pure being now, free from the world's suffering." Mateo scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Liberated them? You have imprisoned their minds. You have stolen their very identities." Isabella's smile widened, a truly unnerving sight. A small price to pay for true serenity. The ancient text, it speaks of this. The founders of this very abbey, they sought this state. A communion with the divine, unburdened by worldly thoughts. But their methods were crude, their night flower extract imperfect. It only induced temporary stupor. She then walked slowly towards Mateo, her eyes fixed on him with an unsettling intensity. I spent years studying forgotten texts, ancient botanical practices. My family, they have always been fascinated by the mind, its vulnerabilities. I found references to this abbey, to the experiments conducted here centuries ago. I realized the secret was not in altering the spirit, but in altering the physical connection of the spirit to the body. Mateo remembered the anatomical sketches, the chemical formulas in her journal. You were perfecting a neurotoxin, a way to induce this stasis. Precisely, Isabella affirmed, her voice filled with a chilling intellectual fervor. The perfect night flower extract, as the old text calls it. It severs the tether. It allows the consciousness to drift, unburdened, while the body continues to exist, a perfect vessel. And the dreams, the agitation, Mateo challenged, trying to find a crack in her chilling composure. Early symptoms. The mind fighting against the severing, Isabella explained, a flicker of something akin to scientific satisfaction in her eyes. The stronger the mind, the longer the resistance, but in the end, the peace always comes. Mateo's mind reeled. This woman wasn't just insane, she was driven by a perverse intellectual curiosity rooted in a centuries-old dark philosophy. She saw herself not as a monster, but as a pioneer. "Who are you really, Isabella?" Mateo demanded. "You're not just a simple nun." Isabella's smile faded, replaced by a cold, distant expression. "My family has a long history of scientific inquiry. Some might call it obsession. We believe the mind holds the ultimate secrets, and the greatest power lies in its manipulation." She looked at the ancient book in Mateo's hand. "That book, Inspector, was a fragmented piece of my ancestors' early research. I spent years searching for it, knowing this abbey held the key. It confirms what I theorized. The gift I have given these women is not a curse, but a profound form of tranquility." The sound of hoofbeats approaching from outside the abbey entrance suddenly broke the tension. A detachment of Guardia Civil, alerted by Mateo's earlier dispatch, had arrived. Isabella's eyes widened slightly, a flash of something akin to annoyance, not fear, crossing her face. "My work here is complete," she stated, her voice returning to its soft, detached tone. "The knowledge has been proven. The experiment, a success." As the first officers burst into the hall, their rifles raised, Isabella took a final, lingering look at the motionless women, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. It was a look of a creator admiring her masterpiece, a chilling testament to her profound, dangerous delusion. The suspense reached a fever pitch. The truth was out, but the horror of Isabella's actions and the question of how to reverse them remained. The arrival of the Guardia Civil shattered the unnatural stillness of Santa Clara Abbey. The officers, accustomed to banditry and common disputes, stared in horrified disbelief at the silent tableau of motionless women. Isabella, far from resisting, merely stood calm, observing the chaos with an almost academic interest, as if she were a detached observer of a new phenomenon. Mateo quickly took charge, explaining the situation to Captain Ramos, the head of the detachment. He presented Isabella's journal and the ancient crypt book as evidence, the horrifying implications of their contents slowly dawning on the veteran officer. Ramos, a man of simple faith and rigid principles, struggled to comprehend the calculated malevolence of Isabella's actions. "She poisoned them, Captain," Mateo explained, holding up the vial found at the secret fountain. "A neurotoxin designed to induce this state of mental stasis and amnesia." The journal details her research, her experiment. Isabella listened, her head tilted slightly, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. She offered no defense, no denial. She was a scientist presenting her findings, utterly convinced of her own twisted righteousness. And these women, can they be brought back? Ramos asked, his voice strained as he looked at the vacant faces of the sisters. Mateo's gaze fell upon the motionless women, a heavy burden settling on his shoulders. We don't know, Captain. The journal details the symptoms, the process, but not a reversal. We need to get the vial and the liquid from the fountain to a proper laboratory in Palma immediately. Perhaps an antidote can be formulated, or at least a way to counteract the effects. He then recounted Isabella's chilling confession about her family's scientific inquiry and their long-standing fascination with the mind's vulnerabilities. She believes she has liberated them, Captain. She considers this a triumph, a perfection of an ancient, dark art detailed in that crypt book. Ramos, though visibly disturbed, quickly deployed his men. Some were dispatched to secure the abbey, ensuring no one disturbed the affected women. Others were sent to the village to arrange for a rapid transport of the evidence to Palma and to request a team of medical experts and scholars. Mateo, however, couldn't shake the unsettling calm of Isabella. Her detachment was unnerving. Why, Isabella? He pressed again, ignoring Ramos for a moment. What is the ultimate goal of this liberation? Isabella's eyes met his, and for the first time, a hint of something deeper, something beyond mere scientific curiosity, flickered within them. To truly understand the mind, Inspector, one must first dismantle it. To rebuild, one must first break. Imagine a world where consciousness is a pliable thing, where memory can be erased or even replaced. A world where suffering can be extinguished, not through faith, but through precise intervention. Her words sent a shiver down Mateo's spine. This wasn't just about controlling individuals. It was about controlling humanity itself, on a fundamental, terrifying level. It was the ultimate power fantasy, cloaked in the guise of scientific advancement and false benevolence. You seek to play God, Mateo accused, his voice sharp with disgust. Perhaps, Isabella conceded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile returning. Or perhaps merely to complete what nature began. The brain, Inspector, is a chemical engine, and every engine can be tuned, altered, perfected. As the Guardia Civil prepared to escort Isabella from the abbey, she cast one last, lingering look at the silent sisters. There was no remorse, no regret, only a profound sense of accomplishment. She had achieved her aim, and the motionless women were her silent, chilling testament. The abbey, once a place of spiritual retreat, had become a chilling monument to a twisted ideology. The mystery of the motionless women was beginning to unravel, but the larger, more terrifying question of Isabella's true intent and the depths of her family's dark inquiry now loomed large. Mateo knew that even with Isabella captured, the shadow of her actions and the potential for their replication would haunt him long after he left Valdemosa. The path to recovery for the women would be long and uncertain, a race against time and the insidious effects of a poison designed not to kill, but to steal the very essence of life itself. If you're still on the edge of your seat, don't miss the thrilling conclusion to The Abbey, where 51 women stood motionless for days without memory. Subscribe to our channel now for the final chapters. Remember, this is a fictional story. The journey to Palma was fraught with tension. Isabella, though securely bound, maintained her unnerving composure, observing the passing landscape with an almost detached interest. Mateo, on the other hand, felt the crushing weight of responsibility. The lives of 51 women hung in the balance, their silent forms a constant reminder of Isabella's chilling experiment. Upon arrival in Palma, Mateo wasted no time. He immediately delivered the vial from the fountain, samples of the abbey water, Isabella's journal, and the ancient crypt book to the city's most respected chemist, Dr. Elias Navarro, and its most renowned Latin scholar, Professor Álvaro Méndez. Both men were initially skeptical, but the sheer volume of evidence and Mateo's grim demeanor quickly convinced them of the gravity of the situation. Dr. Navarro, a meticulous man with spectacles perched on his nose, began his analysis of the liquid and the vial with a focused intensity. The nightflower extract proved to be a complex blend of botanical compounds, some known, some obscure, all meticulously documented in Isabella's journal. The challenge lay not just in identifying them, but in understanding their synergistic effects on the human nervous system. Inspector, Dr. Navarro reported after several grueling hours, "This is not a simple poison, it's a sophisticated neurotoxin. The nightflower acts as the primary agent, inducing a profound neurological shutdown. The other compounds seem to act as potentiators, accelerating and prolonging the effect and critically inducing the amnesia." "Can it be reversed?" Mateo asked, his voice tight with anticipation. Navarro sighed, adjusting his spectacles. "It's difficult. The effect is deep-seated. We might be able to counteract the immediate neurological paralysis, but the amnesia, the loss of memory, that is a far more complex challenge. It's as if their minds have been deliberately wiped clean in certain areas. It will require extensive research, and even then, there are no guarantees." Meanwhile, Professor Méndez, a stoic and scholarly man, had been poring over the ancient crypt book. His brow furrowed deeper with each translated passage. When he finally looked up, his face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and horror. "Inspector Vargas," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "this book, it is a testament to a truly disturbing school of thought. It describes in chilling detail methods to purify the human mind by severing its connection to earthly experiences. It speaks of a higher consciousness achievable only through the systematic erasure of personal history and emotion." "And the Abbey founders?" Mateo prompted. "They were adherents of this philosophy," Méndez confirmed, tapping a finger on a particularly disturbing passage. "It seems they believed that by inducing this state of mental stasis, they could achieve a form of spiritual transcendence, a direct communion with the divine, free from the distractions of individual thought or memory. Sister Isabella was not merely recreating, she was perfecting their ancient, misguided quest." The professor went on to explain how the text detailed specific meditation techniques, dietary restrictions, and ultimately the use of a botanical agent, the night flower, to achieve their desired state. Isabella had simply replaced the crude ancient methods with precise modern chemical applications. The implications were profound. Isabella wasn't just a rogue, twisted scientist. She was the product of a lineage, a dark, hidden academic tradition rooted in the very fabric of the Abbey's history. This was not an isolated incident, but the latest iteration of a centuries-old pursuit of mind control. Mateo felt a renewed sense of urgency. The physical recovery of the women was one battle, but the restoration of their minds, their memories, was an entirely different, perhaps even impossible one. He envisioned the women, alive but vacant, forever trapped in Isabella's cruel liberation. "We must try, Professor," Mateo insisted. "Every effort must be made to restore them. They are not merely bodies. They are individuals, with lives and memories that have been stolen." As the chemists and scholars continued their arduous work, Mateo returned to Isabella's cell in the Palma prison. He wanted to understand, to truly grasp the depth of her delusion. He wanted to know if there was any humanity left within her, any flicker of remorse. But as he looked at her, calm and self-assured, he saw only the cold, unyielding conviction of a woman who believed she had done something truly profound, even noble. The race was on, not just for an antidote, but for the very essence of the women's identities. Days blurred into nights in Palma. Dr. Navarro and his team worked tirelessly, locked away in their laboratory, dissecting the complex chemical structure of Isabella's neurotoxin. Professor Mendez, equally immersed, continued to unearth disturbing insights from the ancient crypt book, piecing together the full historical context of Isabella's horrifying project. Mateo, though exhausted, remained a constant presence, shuttling between the laboratory and the prison, desperately seeking any sign of progress. He visited the affected women, now housed in a makeshift infirmary within a wing of the Palma Hospital. They remained in their terrifying state of stillness, their open eyes reflecting nothing but the sterile white ceiling. Yet, observing them, Mateo felt a persistent, gnawing sense that they were not entirely gone. There was still a faint pulse of life, a spark, however dim, waiting to be rekindled. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Navarro emerged from his lab, his face smudged with soot, but with a flicker of excitement in his tired eyes. "Inspector, we have something, not an antidote, not yet, but a counter-agent. A substance that appears to directly oppose the primary effects of the night flower extract." Mateo's heart leaped. "What does that mean?" "It means we can potentially reverse the neurological paralysis," Navarro explained, a rare smile touching his lips. "It should allow the brain to resume basic functions, movement, perhaps even speech. The initial phase of their stasis should begin to break." "And the memory?" Mateo pressed, the question heavy with desperation. Navarro's smile faded. "That remains the greatest challenge. The amnesia is a secondary effect, a deeper imprint. It will be a far longer, more uncertain process. But this counteragent, if successful, is the first step. It might allow their minds to at least begin to form new memories, even if the old ones are lost for now." The medical team, under Navarro's guidance, immediately began administering the counteragent to the women. Mateo watched, his breath held tight in his chest as the first doses were given. Hours passed. Then slowly, infinitesimally, the first signs of change appeared. A faint tremor in a hand, the subtle shift of an eye, no longer entirely vacant, a shallow gasp of air that was clearly voluntary. One by one, or sometimes in small groups, the women began to stir. Not violently, not with sudden awakenings, but with a gradual, agonizingly slow return to movement. Mateo felt a surge of profound relief mixed with a deep, lingering apprehension. They were moving, they were breathing, their eyes were responding to light. But their faces still held that unsettling blankness. When he spoke to them, they responded with confused, disjointed sounds, or simply stared, their minds still a void. He realized the true horror of Isabella's ambition. She hadn't just paralyzed them, she had erased them. They were bodies with no past, blank slates, their identities stolen. The emotional weight of this realization was almost crushing. He returned to Isabella's cell, a fresh wave of anger rising within him. "They are moving, Isabella," he stated, his voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "But their memories, they are gone. You stripped them of everything." Isabella, for the first time, showed a flicker of disappointment. The amnesia was a side effect of the dosage, perhaps, or the purity of the final extract was not absolute. The goal was profound tranquility, not erasure. But a blank slate is not without its uses, Inspector. Imagine the possibilities. Her words were chilling, confirming Mateo's deepest fears. She wasn't just a mad scientist. She was a dangerous ideologue, already planning the next iteration of her monstrous experiment. He knew then that even if the women physically recovered, the psychological battle was far from over. The real work of healing, of attempting to reconstruct shattered identities, was only just beginning. The glimmer of hope was real, but so was the terrifying scale of the damage. Weeks turned into months. The Santa Clara Abbey, once a silent monument to Isabella's chilling experiment, slowly began to reclaim its purpose, though forever marked by the trauma it had endured. The majority of the 51 women had regained full physical mobility, their movements no longer stiff and unnatural. They could speak, eat, and perform basic tasks. But the recovery of their memories remained elusive, a stubborn, profound void. They were like children, relearning the world, but without the comfort of childhood innocence. They had no recollection of their names, their families, their past lives, or even the events that led to their current state. Catalina, frail but resilient, became a crucial figure in their care, gently guiding them through daily routines, trying to trigger forgotten responses with familiar objects or faint sense of the Abbey. Dr. Navarro and his team continued their research, tirelessly searching for a way to reverse the amnesia. They theorized that while the night flower extract had indeed severed the tether, as Isabella had so chillingly put it, it might have only suppressed the memories, not entirely destroyed them. The challenge lay in finding the right stimulus, the correct chemical key to unlock the imprisoned pasts. Mateo, haunted by the vacant eyes of the women, found himself returning to the Abbey often. He would walk through the quiet corridors, listening to the soft, confused murmurs of the recovering sisters. He spoke to them, trying to piece together fragments, hoping for a breakthrough. It was a painstaking, often heartbreaking process. He learned about Sister Anna's love for roses, about Sister Sophia's melodious singing, not from them directly, but from Catalina and old Abbey records. He would show Sister Anna a rose, hoping a spark would ignite, but she would only gaze at it with mild curiosity. Isabella remained imprisoned in Palma, a chilling enigma. She showed no remorse, no sign of breaking. She simply continued to believe in the validity of her research, meticulously jotting down notes in a new prison-issued journal, conceptualizing future experiments. She remained convinced that true freedom lay in the obliteration of personal history, a terrifying philosophy that Mateo vowed to fight with every fiber of his being. One afternoon, as Mateo sat with a group of recovering sisters in the Abbey garden, the air filled with the gentle scent of jasmine. He heard a sound he hadn't heard in months, a faint, almost imperceptible humming. It was Sister Sophia, the one Catalina had mentioned as having a beautiful voice. She was sitting by herself, looking at the distant mountains, and slowly, hesitantly, a soft, fragmented melody began to emerge from her lips. It was a hymn, one of the ancient ones sung in the Abbey for centuries. Mateo's heart leaped. He looked at Catalina, who also heard it, tears welling in her eyes. It was faint, incomplete, but it was a memory, a fragmented echo of who she once was. It was not a complete breakthrough, but it was a sign, a whisper from the depths of her suppressed past. It suggested that perhaps, just perhaps, the memories were not entirely lost, only buried. The recovery would be slow, agonizingly so. Some memories might never return, but the human spirit, Mateo realized, was incredibly resilient. The support system forming around the women, Catalina's unwavering care, the dedicated medical team, and even Mateo's own persistent visits, was their lifeline. They were relearning to live, to connect, to rebuild a sense of self, even if it was a new self, forged in the crucible of trauma. The mystery of the Abbey was resolved. Isabella's chilling purpose had been exposed and her methods understood. But the true resolution, the full recovery of the women, remained a distant, challenging goal. Mateo knew his work in Valdemosa was far from over. He would continue to push for research, for therapy, for any means to help these women reclaim their stolen pasts. The silence of the Abbey had been broken, not by screams of terror, but by the hesitant, hopeful whispers of life striving to remember. The echoes of Valdemosa would serve as a powerful, chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked scientific ambition and the profound, irreplaceable value of human memory. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of The Abbey, where 51 women stood motionless for days without memory. If you were gripped by this tale of psychological suspense and mystery, please subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories. Remember, this is a fictional story,